Council will call the meeting to order. For the record, it is Tuesday, May 24th at 4:31 p.m. We will begin this afternoon's work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Councilman Burnt.
Here.
Councilwoman Perot.
Here.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilman Hoagland.
Here.
Mayor Simonson.
Here. Next item is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move adoption of the agenda as published.
Second motion.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as published. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Pearl, I think your motion will be made after we adopt the agenda on the next one. Is there any other discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. Next item up is the consent agenda. Councilwoman Pearl.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move item number 9, the intergovernmental agreement with Ada County Highway District from the consent agenda to item 17 for council discussion.
Move it to the consent right after this location. Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
I have a motion second to move item 9 to items moved from the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the item is moved. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move approval of the consent agenda as amended with the removal of item number 9 and for the mayor to sign and clerk to attest.
Second motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is approved, except for item 9, which we will now consider item 9 under items moved from the consent agenda. Councilwoman Perot.
You'd like me to start the discussion?
Yes.
Okay, so in regard to the intergovernmental agreement, I have not heard from my fellow council members their thoughts on the contract, the scope of work. And we do already have a commitment for that 2.5 million in our budget, which was voted on. But I just thought it would be wise for us to potentially put on record verbal agreement for this since it's such a significant decision. So for myself, I've had conversations with the mayor about the funding of the other 2 transportation departments that will be involved in this process, ACHD and ITD. And I am really wanting to know the timing of the anticipated timing from ACHD on when they might be able to make a financial commitment to the project. So that's the conversations that I've had with the mayor. I don't know if there is anything else that my fellow council members would like to ask or add in that regard. Just basically wanted to open it up if there was any conversation that needed to be had before we voted on it.
Council, questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just a comment. I was pretty encouraged that there is a willingness to move forward and that ACHD and ITD have come to, an agreement themselves on how to sort of work together in terms of the design and scope of that. I do think we're going to be stepping through this. So I think to me, it's not out of order that all of the funding pieces haven't been totally lined up at this point. I'd look to the mayor for more commentary on that, but at least I feel comfortable moving forward that, this is kind of the step that we're going to take next. And then they'll be solidifying their funding and putting this into their kind of plans, especially as it relates to other funding sources that both of them have.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Yeah, we knew, when this discussion that you initiated began that this was a project that was needed, but it really wasn't on very high on their radar. Lots of things out there. And by bringing some money to the table, we were able to elevate that. And it'd be a great benefit to our community. And the fact that we were able to use that funding to initiate design work, which is going to take 18 months, that does allow them time to move things forward and get things lined up. And, you can never predict the future when it comes to other agencies and whatnot, but it does put it in a place that is much better than it'd be if we had not done anything. So I think it was a good move by the mayor and council to do that. And I think we'll continue to see that move forward at a rate they're comfortable with and not be stalled out. So I'm comfortable with going with this agreement this time.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
maybe one additional comment. I do think it's really to our benefit to have ITD and ACHD working together, especially because ACHD has new pedestrian design guidelines and they'll be implementing those. And I think that this is really good that they're working together and as opposed to us trying to work with each of them separately.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I don't have anything else to offer. Just thank Councilmember Perot for pulling this off of consent. It is a big dollar amount, and I think that we all are in agreement, but continuing to hear that vocal support from my other council members is reassuring and just reaffirms that we're going to have to continue to be the leader on this, likely moving forward. So thank you, council member, for asking this to be pulled off. And I agree with the other comments from my council members.
And just to follow up on the funding, you're going to continue to hear me advocate for funding from all sources. I'm just going to leave it there for now, but all sources as it relates to advancing this project that's important and critical for our community. So,
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Pro.
Thank you. Yeah, I primarily just, we have the funds set aside in the budget, but this really gives permission to now actually start spending them. So I think that's primarily the reason I wanted to just hear from fellow council that this is indeed, everyone is ready to move forward and actually execute on it. So thank you very much to everyone. And I appreciate the comments.
Right. Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Yeah, thank you, Councilwoman Perot. And with that, then I move that we adopt the intergovernmental agreement with Ada County Highway District and Outer Transportation Department for the Linda Road overpass and widening.
Second motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve the intergovernmental agreement. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agreement is agreed to. Thank you. So next item up is item 14, which is an annual report from Ada County Assessor, Robert Mcquaid. Always a favorite this time of year. So Mr. Mcquaid, welcome.
Mr. Mayor. Mr.
Councilman.
McQuaid, we only want good news, only good news today. House, prices of homes are dropping. We have a ton of inventory, that type of information. That's what we're looking
I
for.
guess I'll throw page 2 and 7 away. One to go. I'm going to set my watch here because I just want to go 10 minutes and not over that. This is probably my 26th visit here to Meridian to do an assessment briefing. You're one of the very first agencies I did this with. So as you look back over that 25 years, quarter of a century, Meridian has changed so much. It is just, I'm just amazed, and it is so neat what's going on over here. With that, we're sending out our assessment notices. They're going out next week, actually this week. We'll probably start getting calls, I'm going to guess Tuesday and then Wednesday, a lot of calls. Last year, we had a 26% increase in assessed values, the highest we've ever had, but yet it was the fewest number of appeals that we had had in over 2 decades. Very small number of appeals. And we attribute that to probably the public because of the great job that local media has been doing, that people really understood what was going on in the single family residential market. A couple of things I just want to point out. One of them just being, what is it the assessor does? People always say, are you the tax collector? No, that's the treasurer's job. And she doesn't like it when people call me the tax collector. But it's what the assessor does. Our job is we allocate the taxes. Here in Meridian, for example, we will, based upon our valuation, we will determine which each individual who owns property, for each property, what their portion of tax is going to be for the city of Meridian's budget based upon the valuation that we make. So we take that role very seriously. We don't want to overassess someone. If we do, they're paying more than your fair share. We don't want to underassess someone because the rest of us will be picking that up. So that's what the assessor does. We don't collect taxes, we allocate taxes. How close are our values to actual property sales? As you can see here in 2021, single family residential were about 94% of what the expected sales price would have been. And statistically, that would have been 94%. And commercial is 97%. As you can see at 2020, we were right at 94% and 94%. And those numbers are assessment level. We have to be at 100% plus or minus 10%, but it's really important. We're going to come back to assessment level in just a moment here. So here, getting into the values, the total market value that we have is about a little bit less than $29 billion. That's not the taxable value. The potential taxable value, we need to take out the homestead exemption is $4 billion, other exemptions, 48 million. And those exemptions, at the time we did this, we hadn't received all the exemptions. The commissioners have until the 18th or the 15th of May to get all of the exemptions processed. So that number now is probably closer to zero. Operating property, 228 million. Operating property, that's the property that's owned by utilities. A real good example in Meridian would be railroad tracks. That's operating property. The tax commissions assesses those, and they do a very different method. They call it the unitary value. They will value the entire Union Pacific Railroad. And then they decide what portion of that belongs in Idaho. And then based upon line miles of track, they will allocate that out to the different taxing authorities. And we don't get those numbers from the tax commission until October or until August, and they'll actually be incorporated when the levies are being certified. So you have potential taxable value about $25 billion. On the residential side, about $23 billion. That's up 40% compared to 2021. And what's driving this? Before I get into the market drivers, the trends, median assessed value here in Meridian for single family residential is 33%. It's a little bit higher than the county median value. The county median value is right at 31%. So Meridian's a little bit higher. But when you look at all of the demand for single family residential property over here in Meridian, that really shouldn't be much of a surprise that there's a little bit higher median value. Market drivers, in-migration, land values, just we can't even keep up with the land values. We do our best. I think you do a good job, but it's changing so fast. We're doing a good job, I think, on the assessments here. Commercial values. Real property is just a little bit less than $6 billion. That's up 30%, 29%. Business personal property. This is one of the few areas where the percent change is a positive number. Most of the other places is a negative number, albeit maybe 1%, 1.5%. And that is that business personal property, several years ago, they had a $100,000 exemption, the first $100,000. That was changed to $250,000. So more and more business personal property is coming off the rolls. And that is not surprising. I know that there are certain interests that think business personal property should be completely taken off because the difficulties in assessing it, that is a deterrent for businesses coming into the state. So it wouldn't surprise me at some point in time, 5-10 years, that business personal property will be a thing of the past. This, the number, by the way, that 250,000 is going to come off, the state is going to be reimbursing the taxing authorities of that. So it's not a loss, but that money will then be fixed into the future. So total commercial property, $6 billion, that's up about 28%. New construction, that's an important number because that's how much we, the counties and the cities and other taxing authorities, we can increase our budget, it was by 3%, and then add the new construction value on that. That has been changed. You don't get the whole new construction, it's 90% of the new construction, but is how that works. If your budget was, it was $1 million, and you took the new construction value times last year's levy, and we'll say that's $100,000, you can now budget up to $1,100,000 plus the 3%. There's some people who feel that's been one of the real drivers for local government being able for their taxes going up. And I really do think new construction, I've seen a model where new construction really does pay for itself. So residential new construction is $941 million at total at the bottom. You'll see there at the bottom in the third column over. Residential is $503 million. It's a little bit off last year. It's $510 million. Commercial up 5% to $322 million. And then new subdivisions and change of status in change of use of land. That's $99 million. This is the last year land use, changes in land use will be considered part of new construction. From now on, it's just going to be strictly the improvements, the physical structures that were put on the land. That's where the value of new construction will come from, not for the change of use. An example of change of use would be if you had a farm at the beginning of the year and it had been subdivided at the end of the year, that would all be assessed as new construction. The value as developed land but again, that's not going to be that this is the last year. Well, you're not going to see that again in the future years. Urban renewal, you got the Union District at 5.3 million is 5 million% increase. It's the largest increase. There was just, I think, an amendment there that is what caused that to go up to 5.3 billion. Total increment value is 827 million. That's about 48%. Okay, we're just going to wrap up here with overall tax burden. This is where we get into two concepts I really want to discuss. It's really understood, very misunderstood, I should say. Tax burden is who pays the taxes, residential or commercial. You'll see here for 2021, residential will be paid 73% of the property taxes. Commercial paid 27%. People think that that's shifting because of the way we're assessing that. Our assessments on commercial property are not as accurate, that we're under assessing commercial property. As I showed you, we're at 97%. Year 4, it was at 94%. Some people contend that we're under assessing. And I just really like to dispel that. But before I get into that, you'll notice that in 2020, commercial is paying 30%. Now they're at 27. Residential is 70 up to 73. The reason that change is occurring is just a couple of very good reasons. Number one of the first reason I want to discuss is, in my 10 minutes are up, I'll quickly wrap this up. Here you have 47,000 residential parcels here in Meridian, 2,700 commercial parcels. In other words, you have 17 times the number of residential parcels as you do commercial parcels. So just the sheer number of parcels says that residential is going to be paying more. Residential value is about $23 billion. Commercial is about $6 billion. So residential is 4 times the value of the commercial. And also, as we're seeing residential increase so much faster, that of course is causing that number to get bigger. The increase in residential value this last year was $6.5 billion, commercial 1.3 billion. So residential increased at 5 times the factor as the commercial. So that's why the commercial property is paying a lower percentage of property tax, not because we're under assessing, but because we have a lot larger volume of residential properties and the dollar volume is so much higher. As I said, some people feel that we're not assessing them equally. That is a concept called level. So we have burden, who's paying, and then we have the level. I have no control over the burden at all. I'm not going to decide who's going to, somebody's going to be subdivided, who's going to be buying houses, commercial properties. I have no control over that at all. We just look at the market and interpret it. But what we do have control over, that is the assessment level. How close are we to 100%? As you can see, we started out with saying residential was 94% for 21. commercial is 97%. So I just really want to make that clear that, that the assessor controls the level, but not the tax burden. And with that, I'm going to draw this presentation to a close. It'll be my last and final presentation. I've really enjoyed my visits out here. And if you don't mind, maybe if next year at this time I'm feeling homesick, maybe I can just stop by and sit and see what's going on. Mr. Mayor, council members, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mcquaid, I'm sorry I'm not here in the room personally to just thank you and commend you for your many years of service to the county. This information is important, and I look forward to your report every year. And I think it goes without saying you are always welcome in council chambers, officially or unofficially. We would love to see you. Just one question about this last slide. Maybe it's a two-part question. From your perspective, have you seen that divide in tax burden between residential and commercial over the past 5 years? Is this a trend that we're seeing a continuance on, or is this an anomaly in your perspective? And then maybe part two of that is, if you know, is this similar across the state, or is this just, are we seeing this happen only within Ada County?
Mr. Mayor and Councilman Cavanagh, this is very similar across the state. The numbers here in Ada County, they range quite a bit. Boise City is probably 65, 35. You go over to Cuna and it's about 90 residential and 10. And so that split is that phenomenon is going on statewide. And then secondly, this trend has been continuing actually since we came out of the recession in, I think probably about 2009. 2009, we saw, because single-family residential was just collapsing in value, residential and commercial would become commercial was going considerably, the burden was going up, residential was going down. But ever since we came out of the recession in 2009, 2010, that has been diverging, not to what we have seen this year. This is usually it'll be a 0.5%, 1%, but here where we're looking at, at 2 or 3%, that's a pretty big separation.
Thank you.
Thank you for the kind words. I do. It's not very often the assessor gets kind words. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Burke.
Bob, thank you so much for being a dedicated public servant for all of these years. You're one of the best, and we're certainly going to miss you. Quick question for you, and I'm sure you've been asked this question multiple times, and I'm sure that you guys in your office, you do projections and what values, residential values are going to look like 1, 2, 3 years. Do you see this continuing, the trend continuing to go like it's been in the past? Are you seeing it plateau a little bit because of interest rates or whatever? Just wanted to get your perspective on that.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Burnt, yes, first of all, we're not very good at projecting. In my office, 4 years ago, we took all of the managers and the staff, we made projections of where we thought housing prices were going to be. My guess was going to be 550,000 this year. And that's where we are. People were just laughing at me. It's like, how could that possibly be? So we didn't do a very good job. But we do know that at least recent data suggests that it's slowing down, but it's still a very brisk pace. I believe it was March of 22 compared to 21. The percent of increase, I believe it was about 20%. Last year, at that same time, it was about 30 or 35%. So we are seeing that, of course, interest rates are going to impact certainly impact the growth rate of prices for single family residential. But we're also getting pressure of people still moving here. They want to come here. And so that's going to, I think, certainly be some kind of a counterweight to the increased interest rates.
Council, additional questions or comments? All right, well, you're not done yet. Councilman Hogan, you want to join me at the podium?
You're not in trouble, Bob. You're okay.
I was ready to run, but I.
Exactly. I saw your
I probably could've
face.
Made it through those people.
Saw your face. You're like, what is going on here right now?
So we don't offer much here at the City of Meridian when it comes to recognition, but we do like to give recognition with words where we can of gratitude. And, you know, it's not often that we're going to have a lot of public servants that serve for almost 30 years anymore. I don't think that's going to be the trend in public service. Could be wrong, but from that standpoint. So we just have a proclamation that we'd like to read in your honor today, and then I'll turn it over to Councilman Hoagland if that's okay from that standpoint. So whereas Robert H. Mcquaid has provided 28 years of service to Meridian and Ada County, serving the assessor, and has been committed to excellence in public service. And whereas Mr. Mcquaid will be retiring from his position where he has faithfully served the residents and always strived to improve the operations of the Ada County Assessor's Office. And whereas Mr. Mcquaid led efforts to improve accuracy and timeliness of appraisal information, electronic conversion of paper files, and led efforts for the Assessor's Office to gain and maintain the IAAO Certificate of Excellence in Assessment Administration. And whereas Mr. Mcquaid has been recognized for his contributions and was the recipient of the Mills Adler Award for the Idaho Association of Counties in 2009. And whereas the City of Meridian recognizes that through the years, Mr. Mcquaid has served and guided the residents of Ada County with commitment and integrity. Therefore, I, Robert Simpson, proclaim May 24, 2022 to be Robert H. Mcquaid Day in Meridian, and honor the hard work and selfless dedication that Robert H. Mcquaid has given to help the City of Meridian become a vibrant community and a premier city to live, work, and raise a family. Dated this 24th day of May, 2022. So just a little honor to say thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you so much. The office challenge shows everyone, and I'll tell you, I will always cherish this. I was not expecting this, and I will always cherish this, and it's going to be displayed in a prominent place in my house. Thank you so much.
You still can't run off, Bob. So, being elected officials, we know what it's like to go to lots of meetings, do lots of presentations, and you're running here and there. And so we thought, well, you know, he's going to retire. What's he going to do? And we thought, you know, he needs to spend some time with his wife. And so the council and the mayor, we decided to get you we signed a card to you, but also a little gift certificate to take out to dinner somewhere. So not taxpayer dollars, it's all our money, personal money, in Meridian, of course. So we just wanted to give you a nice thank you card and a little gift certificate to express our appreciation for your 28 years of service, your good work for all the residents of this county, and particularly in Meridian, and we just appreciate what you've done. So thank you.
Thank you. I've always considered you a friend. Many years. So kind. So do something new when next year comes around. Thank you so much. It's very humbling.
All right, next item up is item 15, which is the Valley Regional Transit 30 Pine Route and fiscal year 2023 budget requests. Caleb, Miranda, you're going to say anything or just turn this over to Stephen?
Mr. Mayor, we are ready for Mr. Hunt unless you have any remarks you want from staff first.
Nope, just thought I would check. Okay, Stephen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Stephen Hunt, Development Director of Valley Regional Transit. Glad to be here today. I heard a presentation for you about the FY23 funding request from the City of Meridian. So first of all, just wanted to make sure you're all aware of the services that are provided by VRT within the City of Meridian. And I'll be speaking to the the memo that was included in your packet. There are 3 fixed route services that would be identified serving Meridian for fiscal year 2023. Those include the inter-county services of Route 40, which connect Nampa to Boise, Route 42, which also connect Nampa and Boise through Meridian, and then Route 30, which essentially covers the core of Meridian from the east side to the west side, starting at 10 Mile Crossing and going over to the village. In addition to those fixed route services, VRT has been working with the City of Meridian on providing several specialized services. Those include support for Harvest Transit, the Meridian Veterans Shuttle, as well as the Rides to Wellness, which is a program that covers Ada County, including the City of Meridian. So between all those services, we provide a number of transportation options to the residents of Meridian. And the FY23 request would be to continue support of those in addition to any of the other planning support for services, the customer service support, IT, all of the associated programs. Wanted to also spend just a minute talking about what's going on with ridership over the last few months. As you know, COVID has been a really big impact on transit ridership for the last 2 years. But since February of 2021, we've seen ridership bottom out and start to come back. And so when we're comparing now first quarter of FY22 and quarter 2 of FY22 to FY21, we're seeing ridership growth. System-wide, that's up about 18.5%. We're seeing some really significant percent increases in the specialized transportation as well. And that is a lot due to the fact that during COVID, we saw many of those programs close down or significantly reduce their levels of service. And so we're seeing that come back, which is exciting. One more on that slide. We know that comparing it just to FY21 isn't the whole picture. So we wanted to look at the last several years. So although ridership we feel like hit the bottom and is starting to trend up, we're about 75% of where we were, say, in April of 2019, which was pre-COVID numbers. So we're encouraged by the growth. We still have some ways to go. So as it relates, one of the other things that I forgot to mention back here, we've been planning for the launch of the Route 30 for a number of years. We've been working with staff on the schedule of that launch date, and we're proposing to launch that at the beginning of FY23. So we had delayed it initially because of COVID, then we delayed it one more time because of Delta variant. We thought there might be an opportunity to start that in this fiscal year. We are seeing, both in terms of the amount of COVID that's being spread around, as well as just people coming back to work, and those are all trending in the right direction. The ridership is trending in the right direction. We want to have service in place for when developments such as the apartments across the street here come online. We want to have service available for both residents and employers when those open up. So we're targeting October of 2023 to be the start of the Route 30 line. So speaking about the FY23, the specific FY23 funding request, just wanted to reiterate, we apply a cost allocation model to our full budget. We begin by identifying all of the expenses for the year. We identify any non-local revenues and apply those revenues to the budget. Then we categorize those costs into general assessments, into capital and service assessments, and any other specialized services such as the Harvest Transit or Rides to Wellness, and we distribute the remaining local costs among our funding partners. And that's what this graph shows here is total budget, any non-local revenues, the remaining local contributions that are being distributed, and then what Meridian's share of that remaining local contribution is. Last year when we came and we talked about our funding requests, we tried to keep the City Council appraised of all of the different changes that happen as we move from this stage of our initial budget rollout to the final completion and the cooperative agreement. Based on feedback we received last year, we're starting with what is the worst case scenario for our request to the City of Meridian. We will continue to refine our budget over the next several months. Any changes to that would be documented in the cooperative agreement, but as a funding request, our request to the city of Meridian would be the 884. A couple of things that we're still working on is we are still working on finalizing all applying all of the non-local revenues to the current year. We also, at the end of this fiscal year, would have potentially other revenues from FY22 that we would apply, and all of that gets captured in the cooperative agreement, which we would execute at the beginning of FY23. But to note there, when we compare FY22 baseline, again, this was the baseline, not what the executed amount was, because we had originally intended to be running the Route 30 in FY22. We pulled that off as our budget and the planning continued in FY22. But to compare as much as we could, apples to apples, our FY22 baseline request, which would be providing the same levels of service as we're talking about in FY23. This is how those two break out. We are continuing to see some cost increases that are largely due to increased labor. There's health insurance costs that have continued to go up. As we convert to battery electric, the procurement of our electric vehicles, we included a battery lease in there, which is new this year. So we're starting to see some of those cost increases. The cost benefits that we see with going to electric, such as lower preventative maintenance, those we'll see in the future, but we don't see them in the moment. So those are the cost drivers. We also included this year, which was not included last year, is a reserve assessment. And again, that's all outlined in the memo in front of you. And I'm just here to answer any questions you may have on the information presented.
Thank you, Stephen. Council questions.
Mr. Mayor.
Council Administrator.
Hi, Stephen.
Hello.
I apologize. I'm going to be asking detailed questions.
That is okay.
If you could go back to the slide that has the different sort of special senior center, rides to wellness, that list. I just wanted to understand the mechanism through which you guys kind of outsource those services. So in the senior center specifically, my understanding is that for every ride, you guys provide the senior center with a payment, and that payment is meant to reimburse them for gas, drivers, repairs of their vehicles, et cetera. And I just wanted to just double check, and if you want to just follow up via an email or something, that's fine too, if you don't have that in front of you, but what those payments represent. And then, I know they have capital needs. The vehicle they're using is not going to work going forward. It's like over 20 years old. It's been breaking down. Do you guys help provide the capital costs to a provider like the senior center when you're kind of outsourcing the provision of transportation services to them? So just maybe some follow-up on those details and mechanics and what they're meant to reimburse exactly.
Mr. Mayor, Council Member Strader, yeah, we can certainly follow up with more information about that, but it is my understanding that our request for the senior center in particular is a budget that we then bill to on a per ride basis, which is different, say, than how we're talking about costs for fixed route service. And then to your second question about capital needs, I think it depends a little bit on the relationship we have with the provider, but we certainly help our partners with capital expenses. So if there is a capital need, we work with them to identify what that need is and put that into our budget.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. That's really helpful. I think maybe the director, Crystal Campbell of our CBDG group, will possibly reach out to you regarding some details there as well. I just want to make sure if they have a capital need and you have an agreement that they're reaching out to you as well for help if their vehicle doesn't work anymore. So just so we cover all of our bases.
Mr. Mayor, I have a clarifying question.
Mr.
So, Council Administrator, you're saying that you're getting a request on your capital block group grant for funds to the Meridian Senior Center?
Yes, that's correct.
So, Mr. Mayor, council member, we actually have in our budget at least one and possibly two vehicles for the Meridian Senior Center. I think what they're looking for is local match, because we have to have a 20% match for that vehicle. So it may be, and this is something we can follow up, but we do have that in our budget for, I know, at least one vehicle for them. And I think they were also wanting to add another one maybe for next year.
Thank you. I didn't want to take us completely down a rabbit hole, which I'm notorious for. We will definitely follow up with you to make sure we're covering all the details. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Stephen, it's a small amount, but I was just curious if you could explain the reserve assessment that's being implemented. I mean, it's only showing $8,900. What's that going to be used for? Looking in the memo, it talks about, hey, this wasn't used, it's not introduced until this current cycle, but that was it. And I'm assuming that reserve assessment will be a percentage and it's going to be equal for all entities. So if you could explain that a little bit further detail.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Hoagland, that's correct. So we've been working with the VRT board to establish a policy that where VRT could have a cash reserve to on hand, such that if there are any incidents where we might need cash, we have a place to go to that wouldn't require us to come immediately to any of our funding partners and request that in the moment. And so that's the general purpose of it. And it is set, there is the board, working through the board, we've set what that total target is for our reserve amount. And then using the cost allocation model, we distributed that amount among all of our funding partners. And then what's presented here, I believe, is a 10-year timeframe to get up to the reserve amount that we're looking for. And we included that in our funding request of each of our funding partners. Clearly, that's to start the discussion. But yes, it is distributed according to the cost allocation.
Mr. Mayor, follow up.
Councilmember.
Same line of question. If with this $8,900, let's say during the next fiscal year, those funds aren't used, are they reallocated back to the cities, or do you keep them?
That is a good question, Mr. Mayor. I believe they would remain with Valley Regional Transit in an unallocated fund. I don't know the exact terms of how those would be managed, but the intent would be that there would be a cash reserve that would be on hand for Valley Regional Transit in case of emergency. And with the intent of growing that amount over the 10-year period, I have to assume that those would remain with VRT.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Burnt, the target is about 3.9 million for us to have, and that was based on 3 months worth of, I think it's 3 months worth of operating local revenue or for operating. So the board approved a policy that we would negotiate that with each jurisdiction with their cooperative agreements each year. So this is the amount that would be allocated for this year. If we get to the end of 2022 and it looks like there was some savings, we would then credit that back. So the cash reserve amount we might request the next year might be zero, or it might be lower based on, so we have an annual target, and as long as we're hitting that annual target, then over that 10-year period, and it is to collect enough so that we have that reserve available.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember.
I completely understand the intent of what you're trying to accomplish. I don't know if I'm a huge fan of, of having, taxpayer money in an account and knowing that it may or may not be used. I just think that sometimes that gets a little bit murky and it can be just a hair confusing. So maybe something we can talk about in the future. Not sure I'm a huge fan of that, but the question that I had, so just to be clear, and I've been asked this question a couple of times. So we originally came out with the budget for this new route in 2021. Because of COVID, it wasn't implemented again in 2022. Talk to me and provide some clarity with regard to what the difference is from the funds that have been paid to you that haven't been used because the route hasn't taken effect and won't take an effect until October of this year versus how much you're asking for in this budget that will cover this route again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Burt. We have been working with all of our jurisdiction partners, City of Meridian in particular, to identify the monies that we need to operate the services that are provided. In the case of the Route 30, we, like as shown on here on this FY22 baseline request, we had originally included that. By the time we made it to our cooperative agreement in September, we knew that we would not be operating the Route 30 for the full amount of time. We adjusted the amount that we were requesting. And in fact, as per the invoice, we've reduced that further, knowing that there could be an amount that we'd come back and ask for should we start the Route 30 in FY22. So the short answer is we never invoiced the City of Meridian for any Route 30 service.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
I think the best way just to add it, this is the clean dollar figure. There's not a credit that's over at VRT that's waiting or otherwise. I tried to make sure we shored up what is the real cost without these last 2 years of back and forth. Councilwoman Pro.
Thank you. So similar but unrelated question regarding Route 30 or any route really that VRT is running where, you have the ridership numbers. Obviously, ridership wasn't there with COVID, but aside from COVID, help me understand the decision to keep a route going or not going. Is it based on ridership? Is it based on funding? Can you help me understand? I do see these, and if you want to go back to the slide with those numbers, I do see those numbers. They don't look like significant amount of ridership to me, but I don't know how that compares to other routes or what the expectation is from VRT for Route 30. Help explain a little bit more why you're wanting to start it up now in regard to the numbers that you have. Connect those dots for me, if you would, please.
Yes, Councilmember Burrow. We work with each jurisdiction partner to identify transportation needs and then work to secure funding to provide those services. Whether or not that service continues is dependent on both essentially on the funding partners' willingness to contribute or to continue that contribution given the result that they're getting. So we have these conversations each year with our funding partners. Is the ridership that we're getting back for that investment worth it? Ultimately, that comes down to value judgment of each of our funding partners. But more to the point about why are we thinking the Route 30 might be good to launch now, is we are looking, when we launch a new service, we want it to be successful. We want the environment to be ripe. And with the development that's going on at the 10-mile crossing, which is when we originally developed the Route 30, the idea was we're trying to connect the job centers at the 10-mile crossing, downtown Meridian, and out of the village. Those three entities have continued to grow and develop since we originally planned the route. We want it to be, one of the triggers is the residential development that's coming, actually not just in downtown Meridian, but including downtown Meridian, but also along Pine. There's significant development off of state there that's within walking distance of the new service. So there are new development that's coming online that we want to have the service in place as people are moving in, establishing their transportation habits, that they have that as an option. It also provides an opportunity for us to work with each of those developers to establish maybe pass programs, which is something that we are starting to do, so that could be a benefit to the residents of those facilities, and or on the employer side, employer pass programs, which is something that we've done for many years to help encourage different types of travel behavior. So that's kind of the meta environment that we're talking about. Specifically, though, we are seeing people return to more regular activity, although it's still not the same as it was pre-COVID. But we also recognize that it may not be exactly like it was in 2019 for many years. So what we're looking at is, are the specific impacts of COVID, COVID's impact on people's travel behavior changing and lightening? We feel that that is the case. And is the development in the corridor continued to grow in a way that we want transit to be able to take advantage of that? And so those are some of the factors that we're looking at specifically for Route 30. There were some ridership projections that were included in the memo, and those are there to give a sense of what we hope to see once it's implemented. All routes take a little bit of time to mature. People need to learn about it and adjust their schedules accordingly. And the target that it's at the end of that, I think, is at about 8 or 10 boardings per hour, which is roughly where our system-wide average is. And so we would look at that as being successful.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
I mean, I thought one of the comments you also made in your memo that at least I found compelling was that with inflation and particularly the cost of gas going up so much, that is something else that might be a positive factor for ridership. So I'm sort of hoping that that will outweigh the lingering effects of the pandemic, but I thought the memo was great. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Stephen, nice to see you virtually, so I'm not in the room. Thank you, Kelly. Please pass on my appreciation to the VRT board for getting this conversation to us before we go into budget hearings. I think this is good dialogue from amongst the council, and I appreciate your guys' proactive efforts to get this to us earlier rather than later. Maybe a comment first and then a question, because I think Councilmember Burnt brought up a really good question, which is about the reserves. And I think he shares the same concern that at least that I shared when I was on the VRT board about using taxpayer dollars to help build a reserve for another agency. And I think just for the benefit of the council, my level of comfort in supporting this is because it is a slow buildup. I think it also has VRT being really thoughtful about how they're spending their dollars and trying to find some efficiencies to reserve extra revenue. And at the end of the day, if something happens, we still would need VRT to be able to operate in some capacity, and making sure they've got that revenue to do that. To me, I'm comfortable with the request for the reserve as is, recognizing that that's going to come back to us on an annual basis, and future councils will still be able to make that decision about if it makes sense for them or not. Stephen, my question for you is just about when Pine 30 was initially conceived, there was a lot of excitement about, hey, we're going to get these new electric buses, and the city participated in that, and the infrastructure to charge them. And you touched on earlier, and it's in the memo about the batteries. So my question is, we're finally getting close now to being able to launch Pine 30. And I know these buses are still relatively new, but we are now kind of inheriting a depreciated asset to some degree. And so I'm curious about what's the thought from the VRT board or administration about when the cities will be asked to provide additional funding for replacement, repairs, and how that's all contemplated in the funding request.
Mayor, Councilmember Cavanagh, that's a great question regarding capital, and something that we're building into our cost allocation model is sharing those costs among all of our funding partners. So when the Route 30 was developed, we worked with the city of Meridian so this is one area that we did invoice and receive the money and spend it on those vehicles as planned. If we are launching new service, we work with our funding partners to ensure that we have the sufficient rolling stock, the capital. And if it like puts us above where we were and we need a new service to do that service, we work with the entities that are kind of pushing us in that direction. That's the way we've done it in the past to get that additional vehicle, right? We were relatively new at putting the capital costs into the cost allocation model. Being able to do that over with a longer time frame will allow us to share those costs more equitably with our funding partners. But you will see capital costs come to our funding partners according to the cost allocation model, based on where service is being provided and what the cost of that capital is. I hope that answered your question a little bit.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, maybe a follow-up.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Thanks. So Stephen, I guess kind of to that point, City of Meridian purchased the buses, helped fund part of the charging infrastructure, that stock's, by the time Pine 30 begins, that stock will have been on the road for a little over a year. And so I guess one, what's the lifespan on one of those? And what is VRT's approach to making sure that what the city council appropriated for, we receive over the timeline of that capital being in use?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Cavanagh, you're asking about the depreciated value of that particular asset and how do we make sure that the city of Meridian gets credit for that? So you asked a couple of questions in there. One is how long do the buses usually last? And they're 12 to 15 years is the useful life benchmark of those vehicles. How long they actually last can depend a lot based on how the bus operates. But we don't currently have a mechanism kind of thought through in terms of capturing a depreciated amount. There's arguments, I suppose, on, I guess, we don't have that. I could tell you more about how we've done capital in the past, but that's a good question, Councilmember Cavanagh.
And Stephen, Mr. Mayor, sorry if I may.
Councilman Cavanagh.
And Stephen, that's not necessarily something that I think that I need an answer on today, but I guess I think that is something that I would hope staff and the board is exploring, and I would hope would likely be included as part of a future presentation to us.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Maybe a follow-up, just has that bus been operating somewhere somehow during this time? It has not been operating is what I'm getting is a no, it has not been operating. If that helps or doesn't help, I mean,
So we
sitting
purchased, Mr. Mayor, we purchased, we had a contract for up to 12 vehicles. And 4 of them we have taken delivery of and we're operating. The others, partly because of the pandemic, got delayed. So some of those have just been arriving in the last 6 months or so. They are, there's still some charging equipment that's being installed. So a lot of this is still on guarantee and warranty. And so the vehicles that we have in our possession have not all fully gone out to service yet, which is not unusual when you're starting a brand new technology and bringing on that many vehicles. So the vehicles that we will, and I believe we'll be using the 35-foot vehicles, which are the ones that we're taking delivery of and have been for the last few months. So as far as I know, the vehicles that will be operated in Meridian haven't actually been officially put in service yet.
maybe that helps answer that immediately, but maybe long-term, there would still be additional information Councilman Cavanagh may want to hear from.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I would add that it's true. We pool all those capital resources together. So it's not like there is a Meridian bus that is the only Meridian bus, and when it's expired, we're going to come back and ask for another, whatever to replace that Meridian bus. It becomes a shared resource. So there will be new vehicles out here.
Council, any additional questions? Okay, thank you for this information. This number is in your budget book that you'll be receiving for your consideration through the budget process. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 16, Public Works 2% water and sewer utility rate increase discussion. Turn this over to Lorelei.
All right, I'll just make you give the. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today I'm coming before you to give you some details related to our need for an adjustment to our water and sewer utility rates. So I think before we start the conversation, it's really important to note that we have not increased water or sewer rates since 2014. And today I'll cover the various reasons that have driven the need for that increase. Meridian is in a really unique and enviable position of having no debt. This is in part due to our careful long-term financial planning of mayors, departments, and councils of both past and present. We all subscribe to the save before you spend philosophy, and as such, our rates have to be sufficient to cover those ongoing expenses as well as funding our large capital projects. So we are proposing a 2% increase on the water and sewer base and usage rates. So you'll see there's other components of the utility bill that won't be impacted by this, but that 2% increase will result in about an estimated $1.22 per month increase for our average customer in Meridian. So a little bit of background on the city's enterprise fund. So this is the fund that supports the water and wastewater utilities and has several revenue sources. So the majority of the annual revenue comes from our water and sewer rates. You'll see about a third of our revenue comes in the form of assessments. Those are also sometimes called hookup fees, which are paid when new development connects to the system, and that's the buy-in to their share of the system's capacity and replacement value. Expenses in the enterprise fund come in two primary forms. The first is funding our ongoing personnel operating and maintenance expenses, and the second is funding our, in the enterprise fund, usually large one-time capital projects that are needed to increase system capacity, improve customer service, and or meet state and federal regulations and requirements. So this is our financial model of the enterprise fund. So in order to maintain the stability of the enterprise fund and of utility rates, we plan on a 10-year horizon. So we have a detailed financial model that looks at operating expenses, capital projects, and revenue based on projected growth rates and use rates to show us what we think our fund is anticipated to do over the 10-year horizon. So you'll see our fund balance is dropping below the solvency point in or around 2028. And this is really due to a significant increase that we're seeing in the capital construction side. We've had to add close to $47 million in additional expenses to our planned project portfolio. These costs are primarily for existing projects, not adding new projects. In the current market, we're seeing bids come in between 20 and 50% higher than our engineers' estimates regularly. We are also seeing some increases on our operational side as related to chemical costs and electricity rates, just to name a few. However, they have a smaller impact on the fund balance than those large capital projects. So a couple of things to note. As I already mentioned, we have not increased the water sewer utility rates since 2014. In 2014, we implemented a 10-year EPA fee to cover expensive capital costs based on new federal and state requirements that were put in place at our wastewater utility. That fee is set to sunset in 2024. That fee has been really successful in allowing us to collect the necessary revenue over the 10 years to complete the required wastewater projects and remain debt-free. You'll also see the last time that we updated our assessment or hookup fees was in 2017. It should be noted that we're in the process of completing a cost of service study that will help us determine where those assessments fees should be set. And we anticipate bringing back an increase in those fees later this summer. So you'll see this is our proposal that models increasing the rates by 2% and increasing the assessment fee by our estimates. So it improves our solvency picture. You may wonder or want to know why our picture still drops below in 2031 and why we're not asking for a larger increase today. We look at this financial model every year and it changes based on actual project costs, amounts spent, revenues collected. And so this is the increase that we would propose this year, an update to the assessment fees, and then reevaluate again next year and bring forward the picture again at next fiscal year. So where we compare to others, Meridian continues to have water and sewer rates that even with the 2% increase fall almost $10 per month below the valley-wide average and over $25 per month less than some of our neighboring cities. However, I did want to take a minute to talk about some of the low-income assistance programs that are available to our customers for their utility bills. One of those is the Meridian Cares program. This program is funded by the city and administered by LADA, and customers who meet financial eligibility requirements can receive up to $100 per year to help pay for their water, sewer, and trash bills. There are additional community-sponsored programs that are not part of the city that are also available. The Boise School District puts out a really good resource guide that outlines how you can get assistance with utility bills, among other types of assistance resources. So our schedule for moving forward, we are publishing a notice of this proposed increase in the next 2 utility bills. We're also publishing it in the newspaper, and we plan to hold a public hearing at the June 14th, 6 p.m. regular council meeting. If all of that moves forward and council approves the 2% rate increase, we would look to implement that increase on June 15th. And just a couple of notes, Public Works is really proud of providing the critical and highly regulated services that we do to the Meridian community. Our services are essential. We don't ask for this rate increase likely. However, the rising cost of doing business and funding our critical projects have driven the need for the adjustment. We really strive to keep our rates stable and affordable while still providing premier water and wastewater services to the City of Meridian community. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the proposed increase.
Thank you, Lorelei. Council questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
not really a question, but more of a comment. You know, first off, I think that this is important. I think that you are right that in the past, it's, you know, past council, past mayor, past directors and staff who have put Meridian in a position where we're, you know, where we have what we have and without any debt. It's been the Meridian way for generations, and hopefully we can keep it that way for as long as we can. So I applaud you and those who have came before you for a job well done. I think on top of that, I think it's really important that we let our residents know, and I'm sure the mayor's office will reach out to the community and let them know that this is happening. And so that if there are folks who have concerns or questions, that they can frequent the public meeting that we'll have next month. So thank you so much.
And as was mentioned, it's going out in everyone's utility bills, and it will also be going out on Nextdoor and social media.
Good.
Yeah. Councilwoman Schrader.
Thanks, Lorelei. Great presentation. You know, on the one hand, I feel like 8 years without an increase, that's fantastic execution of our fiscal philosophy. On the other hand, part of me thinks, wow, 8 years without an increase, that kind of scares me, if I'm being honest. If we had more regular increases going forward over time, what does that curve look like?
Mayor, Councilwoman Strader. So it would bring that insolvency point up. However, we try really hard to balance the need of collecting what we actually need and we have projected projects for, and not over collecting for unknowns. So we've tried to balance that and just collect for what we've needed.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. You know, the one thing that gives me pause a little bit is just the mix in terms of our reliance on assessments compared to having a base that's completely supported by the existing residents. Because as we build out, right, like 20 years down the line, as the whole city is filled out, I think we just want to reach an end state where the base of residents supports the utility and not a reliance on new construction that may not happen. I guess if you could comment on that, is that off base, or is that something we should be thinking about?
Councilman Administrator, that's a great point. One of the things that will kind of offset, though, as assessments decrease, our need to build additional infrastructure will also decrease. And so you will see that kind of leveling where we will have less of the expensive capital projects and more just reliance on steady state operations if the city's not continuing to grow.
Mr. Mayor, one more.
Councilwoman Schrader.
One thing I would love is, as we do these projects that we're considering with ARPA funding, the things that, you know, save us on operating costs going forward, like, you know, using our biogas to generate electricity, for example, things like that. it would be great if we could keep track of those, money saving projects that we are doing. I just think it's really great to show, the resourcefulness of your department in terms of digging deep to save on operating costs as much as possible, because I feel like that is a part of the story. Thank you.
And if I could just add in here, I've expressed some of the same concerns from Councilman Schrader that not taking an increase in 8 years. I think when you're having a growing staff, growing issues, there probably should have been. I think that's what, by doing the rate study, is helping us true up where we should be taking more ongoing costs compared to the practice that we've had where we've commingled the costs, and that will help us get to that point, and we can continue to do that. But I do think that it's our hope that where we're at is not the increases that we're seeing this year compared to last year, not the future of increases moving forward. So prudence and setting what we think we need, but being prepared for additional adjustments to what the market finally levels out at that number, whatever that may be in the coming years. So we understand this is step one of potential many, but what we think we truly need access to move forward right now.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Yeah, I don't doubt the need to do this. And so the if part is an answer to me that, yes, we have to do it. It's necessary. We want to keep our system operating and being able to handle the growth. So if we increase assessments, that helps on that end. The only question I keep mulling through, and it'd be interesting to get feedback from the public when you hold the public hearings, is how we do that. Because do we increase it 2% for 2023 in the coming fiscal year? But then in 2024, the EPA fee sunsets, which is 3.75%, and all of a sudden the rates go down, and then it's back to increasing again. So do we hold off a year and then take that EPA fee, absorb that because they're already paying it, continue that? And I want to make sure people understand that reason why, and then implement a series of what changes need to be made moving forward. So it's just a matter of how it's done is kind of, I'm not settled in my mind yet, but your comment on that, I'd certainly welcome.
So Councilman Hoagland, so we did run that analysis. So the EPA fee set to sunset in 2024 is $3.75. If we did nothing and waited until 2024 and replaced that EPA fee, it would be approximately a 6.6% rate increase at that time.
Council, any additional questions at this time?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Well, I appreciate the presentation. Appreciate your work and kind of sharing kind of where things are headed with the council. Similar to Councilmember Hoagland's question, I guess maybe that may just be a suggestion, is I think it's important that we share what staff is recommending, but perhaps also provide the public for feedback on some of the other proposals I know that you guys as a department have contemplated. I kind of have sat somewhere where Councilmember Hoagland was, is just letting the EPA fee sunset and have that replaced with the increase, but obviously want to hear back from the public. And then perhaps a suggestion, Lorelei, it sounds like that you and your team are reviewing rates and kind of where things need to be on an annual basis. And I think you've heard good feedback from the mayor and some of my council members about maybe 8 years was too long. And I think having you come back to us on an annual basis, even if the recommendation is we don't anticipate needing to change the rates this year, I think that's beneficial for the council for us to hear that on a I guess a reoccurring basis, sometime predictable, perhaps maybe for our budget hearings, so that we're all on the same page and we can contemplate that when we go into budget hearings. And then just my only question was about on Meridian Cares, and I don't expect you to know this off the top of your head, but bonus points if you do. Do we know about, on average, how much we spend through that program for people who are in need?
So Councilman Cavanagh, I believe, and this is a rough estimate, but I believe last year was about $13,000 in the ballpark, $13,000.
Great. Thank you, Laura. I appreciate that update.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Pro.
I just wanted to say that I appreciate Councilman Cavner's comments, and I agree with him that a yearly review would be great, specifically because The estimated 46 million increase in costs there's several of those projects that are 3+ years long. And so we don't know if it's going to be 55 million next year when, as all of this plays out. And so at least specifically during this time when construction costs, chemical costs are so volatile, the annual review, I think, is really necessary. So.
And maybe just to add to that, I think based upon the way we're approaching this, an annual review will be necessary. Unless there's a dramatic change in the industry, you'll need to come back every year.
The other thing that can change our enterprise fund budget dramatically is changing regulations. So that would be the other thing that could come in, that we would have to, do different projects or bring forward planned projects, which could change that picture as well.
Thank you, Lorelei.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move that we adjourn our work session.
I have a motion to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Council will call the meeting to order. For the record, it is May 24th, 2022 at 6:05 PM. We will begin this evening's regular city council agenda with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilwoman Strader,
Here.
Councilman Burnt,
Here.
Councilwoman Perot,
Here.
Councilman Cavanagh,
Here.
Councilman Hoagland,
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise and join us in the pledge. Next up will be our community invocation, which will be delivered by Pastor Troy Drake. If you'd all please join us in the invocation or take this as a moment of silence and reflection. Pastor.
Mr. Mayor, council members, pray with me. Lord God, we just thank you for this glorious day here in Southern Idaho. It's so beautiful. We appreciate that. Your creation is so awesome and reminds us of how good you are, Lord. And we do thank you for your goodness here in the United States. And of course, here where we live in Idaho and in this great city of Meridian. Thank you for the freedom that we have here and of course, everything that happens in this building. We appreciate, Lord, all of the city workers and planners, all those who make decisions and contribute to the goodness that we have here. And of course, we're asking for protection for those who protect us, the first responders, Lord, and of course, for all the citizens. We appreciate what we have here. We just pray for peace in our city, that all of us could get along, even if we disagree strongly on things, that you'd help us to love one another. And finally, God, last but not least, I'd just like to pray for this meeting and these fine people who you've that represent us in our government. And so we just pray for them and ask that you give them a lot of wisdom and grace as they make decisions. And we pray all these things in your name, Lord. Amen.
Thank you. Next item is the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move adoption of the agenda as published.
Second motion.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as published. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. Mr. Clerk, do we have anyone signed up under public forum?
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Okay. Then with that, we will move on to item 1 under Department Commissioner Reports, which is Public Works Fiscal Year 2022 Budget Amendment in the amount of $829,410. And turn this over to Mr. Raddick.
Mr. Mayor, council members, this item is a budget amendment in the amount of $393,317 for well 26 filter equipment.
First one on the agenda is the 829.
Sorry, this is not for the filter equipment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. This budget amendment is for $829,410 for water main extensions. I wanted to start on the other one because it was simpler. This one's got two parts to it. One is the project itself a bit higher than our engineer's estimate. That's a pretty standard, common story these days. But the second part of this one is that it was not in our budget request last year because we didn't find out the need for this project until right about July, August last year, when the Transportation Department told us that they were going full bore on State Highway 16. So we were unable to put that in. Without this project, our budget requests are working out pretty good with 13 other active projects and committing all but 128,000 of $1 million+ dollars. So we were doing pretty good there, but this one was extra, and so we knew we were going to have to get a budget amendment for it regardless. This is a project to put casings on the water mains that are crossing the future State Highway 16. Very prudent to do that so that there's no chance of water mains breaking and undermining the roadway in the future. So that's the reason for the project and the reason for the amendment. So with that, I'll stand for questions. We're asking to approve a budget amendment to fund water main extensions projects in the amount of $829,410 and to authorize the mayor to sign the amendment.
Thank you, Cal. Council questions? Or motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Pearl.
I move that we approve Public Works request for fiscal year 2022 budget amendment in the amount of $829,410 to fund the water main extension projects.
Second.
I have a motion, and a second, to approve item 1 in the amount of $829,410. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Strater,
Aye.
Burnt.
Aye.
Burrow,
Aye.
Cavanagh,
Aye.
Hoagland.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to. Next item on the agenda is item 2, which is Public Works fiscal year 2022 budget amendment in the amount of $393,317. Mr. Raddick.
Mr. Mayor, council members, as the mayor said, budget amendment for FY22. This is for well 26 filter equipment contract. Like the other projects that we've been in front of you this year to ask for additional funds on, the filter equipment bid out quite a bit higher than we had anticipated. We think that the budget amount asked for was pretty good. The last filter we did, which was very similar to this filter, the equipment cost right around $600,000. And the costs have been pretty level for the filter equipment for the last few years compared to other costs. And it was just about time for them to get hit. And I think it happened even faster than the supplier was realizing it would, because they're actually asking for extra money on the current filter equipment procurement contracts that they won't be able to get. So it snuck on them, up on them as well. So with that, I would stand for any questions. And again, we're asking for approval for the well 26 filter equipment budget amendment for $393,317 and to authorize the mayor to sign.
Thank you. Council, any questions for staff? If not, a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Pearl.
I move that we approve Public Works request for fiscal year 2022 budget amendment in the amount of $393,373 for well 26 filter equipment contract award.
Mr. Mayor, I apologize. Jessica, can you, or Councilwoman Pearl, can you restate the number? I think you read something different than the amount.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Pearl.
the amount in the motion is $393,317.
Second.
I have a motion, and a second, to approve item 2, budget amendment in the amount of $393,317. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Strater,
Aye.
Burnt. Burrow,
Aye.
Cavanagh.
Aye.
Hoagland.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raddick. So council, next item on the agenda is item 3, which is a request for reconsideration, the findings of fact, conclusion of law for denial of Jamestown Ranch subdivision, H 2021-0074. Mr. Neri, will you be speaking on this item?
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So what's before you is a request for reconsideration of Jamestown Ranch. There's a prior decision of a denial by the city council for an annexation and a preliminary plat. There was a request filed by the applicant's council that is properly filed. It did properly meet the ordinance requirements for request. So it is properly before you, but as with all of these, it's not a hearing. It's not an opportunity for testimony. It's simply a review of the record and review of the decision and the findings that were made. And so then the next step is for the council to make a decision on whether to either grant the request for reconsideration and hold a new hearing at a future date, or whether to deny the request for reconsideration and not allow the item to move forward to whatever the next step would be. But it's really those two decision points, or I guess the third would be to amend the decision in some fashion as well. But this was asking for a remand, essentially back for a new hearing.
Thank you. Council, any questions for missionary?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Mr. Mayor, after reviewing the request for reconsideration from the applicant for Jamestown Ranch, I've reviewed the decision, the finding, and the minutes of the original denial, and I did not find any error that would cause me to reconsider remand this decision. Therefore, I move to deny the request for reconsideration.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to deny the request for reconsideration. Is there discussion?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Mr. Mayor, just to think for the record, I'm sure council's aware, I was absent at that particular meeting, but I did have the opportunity to review the minutes and the decision, and I agree with Councilmember Hoagland's motion tonight as well as the night in question.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schreier.
I echo Councilman Cavanagh's comments. I'm in the same situation and have also reviewed and also believe that the council's decision was sound.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
I agree with my fellow council members. In addition to what was stated in the findings, we had discussion about the way that roads were lining up on the McMillan side, and that was a significant concern for us. And I didn't see anything in the project folder that showed that there were changes that lined up with what we had stated in our comments. So I agree with the motion.
Well, I have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Strader,
Aye.
Burnt, Burrow,
Aye.
Kavanagh,
Aye.
Hoagland.
Aye.
All ayes, and the motion to request for consideration is not approved. It was approved by ayes, but we're not going to approve the reconsideration. Next item on the agenda is item 4, public hearing for Timberline North, Timberline Sub number 2, H 2022-0024. We'll open this public hearing with staff comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Application before you tonight is for a combined preliminary and final plat for Timberline North. Site consists of 9.8 acres of land. It's already zoned R8, located at, there's 2 existing parcels, 655 and 735 West Victory. Basically at the south terminus of Stoddard Road, about a half mile west of Meridian Road on Victory. It was annexed in 2013, but platted in 2017 under the Timberline subdivision. The approved preliminary plat was completed in 2 phases. Phase 1 consists of 24 single-family residential building lots and has recorded and is fully constructed with homes, open space, etc. Phase 2 received final plat approval for 33 single-family residential lots and 4 common lots in March of 2020 and was set to expire May 1st of 2021. Due to unfortunate timing and circumstances, Timberline number 2 did not receive his city engineer signature by the deadline, and no time extension was submitted in accord with UDC standards. Therefore, phase 2 final plat expired, which subsequently made the original preliminary plat expire. The applicant is required to replat the phase 2 area in order to record phase 2 of this final plat. Currently, phase 2 development is constructed per the previous approvals, including the open space, fencing, utilities, sidewalks, and the roads. Everything is in. Because all the subdivision improvements are constructed, the applicant has submitted the previously approved final plat documents from the previous application and an alternative compliance application to allow the existing open space approved with the original submittal to remain as is without requiring the plat to comply with the current open space and amenity standards that were changed in October of last year. Due to the unique circumstances behind the expiration of the plat and the fact that the improvements are already complete and in place, staff believes that additional open space and amenities are not needed and has subsequently, through the director and staff, has approved the alternative compliance request. At the commission hearing on May 5th, there was minimal discussion of the commission, but it was basically regarding this alternative compliance request in the open space. There was only one piece of written testimony. There was none additional. They had issues with rezoning the property from R4 to R8, which is not part of the application. So it's been R8 since 2017. Other than that, there were no other changes by the commission, and there are no outstanding issues for city council and no additional written testimony since then. So I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Joe. Council, any questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Pro.
Thank you, Joe. Just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, the preliminary and final plats haven't changed. That we're just discussing because of the expiration. And so there's not a different plat that we need to, have discussion about. That was my understanding, but I just wanted to double check.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Pro, yes and no. This application largely is ministerial in the sense of we are regurgitating exactly what was approved already. However, because the final plat expired, it expired that previous preliminary plat. So this is technically a new preliminary plat, but it is a copy of the previously approved plat.
Mr. Mayor, follow up.
Councilwoman Pro.
So there's a comment about the infrastructure is already in. And so is it safe to assume that the plat and the infrastructure match? There's not infrastructure that's been built and implemented that are opposite or different than the plat that was proposed?
Councilman Pro, that is correct. I've already done an inspection a few months ago. Everything's in and ready. It just, we missed the deadline. It's unfortunate, but yeah, everything's in and good to go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Council, any additional questions for staff? Okay, would the applicant like to come forward? You can state your name and address for the record.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. For the record, Penelope Constantikis with Riley Planning Services, Post Office Box 405, Boise, Idaho 83701. And I don't want to take up time unnecessarily, so I have a real quick, just to recap for you. Like Joe said, it's very unusual circumstances, and Joe did a great job of presenting the redo in a way that was very comprehensive. So the pre-existing development agreement, just for your recollection, in 2013 required that any lots adjacent to Kentucky Ridge be 10,000 square feet or greater, and that the plats before you this evening are identical to the ones that were previously approved. Just for the amenities, we were heavily loaded on amenities with this project. We have quite a few more than we needed, and I'd be happy to list those if you want to hear about them. Other than that, I'll just leave it alone. As Joe said, the subdivision's fully constructed. The sewer and water lines are in. They've been inspected and accepted by the city. Record drawings have been submitted. ACHD's accepted the roads. The ped ramps are in. Everything is done except the houses. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to visit with you.
Thank you. Council, any questions for the applicant? All right.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Mr. Clark, do we have anyone sign up to provide testimony?
Mr. Mayor, we had one sign in, but they didn't mark they wanted to testify.
Okay. You want to read their name in case, see if they'd like to?
Absolutely. Sandy Smith.
If you'd like to provide testimony, if you'd like to come forward at this time. Okay, we see no. If there's anybody in the audience that'd like to provide testimony, and I'll say online as well, but do online, I don't think would normally provide testimony. So now would be the time to come forward or use the raise your hand feature. Seeing no one wish to testify, does the applicant waive any final comments? The applicant waives final comments. So council, to you for disposition.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Pro.
I move that we close the public hearing for file number H-2022-0024.
Second.
I have a motion, a second to close the public hearing for H-2022-0024. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed. Councilwoman Pearl.
I think this was pretty straightforward, so I'll go ahead and make a motion. After considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to approve file number H-2022-0024 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of May 24th, 2022.
Second.
I have a motion, a second to approve H-2022-0024. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Strader.
Aye.
Burnt.
Aye.
Perot.
Aye.
Cavanagh.
Aye.
Hoagland?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to. Thank you. Next item up is item 5, a public hearing for Records Department's Council Review, CR 2022-0004. Open this public hearing with staff comments.
Mr. Mayor, there are no staff comments unless Mr. Neri had something.
Okay.
Turn my camera on. Just members of the council, again, the only comment I'd have is what's in front of you simply is a request that's required by code in regards to the access onto a arterial or a collector road. And this is not the underlying project. It's just this one provision that's required by council. So just to narrow the focus of where we're at.
Council, any questions for Mr. Neri? Okay, would the applicant like to come forward?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for just a brief moment to kind of refresh. I believe you have all of the information in front of you, but in reality, we are simply coming, as Mr. Neri noted, to accomplish the thing that's required by the UDC. The Planning and Zoning Commission did approve the project in April. And the one provision, because of records being a collector roadway, it does necessitate council approval to waive a requirement that all access be provided from a local street. So specifically, the point is the right-in, right-out access off records, which is provided via a right turn lane element coming into the site. In reality, the access, primary access for residents when they are in this facility will be from a local street, Eldon Gray, via a service drive on the east side of the site that serves both that and CarMax. You can see from the graphic that if somebody comes in from the west, which we deem the front door, and that front door really provides access to the management, marketing, and recreation complex between the two structures. But circulation then for the folks coming to and from is primarily from the east side of the facility up to Eldon Gray. Now, they certainly can circulate to records and use the right-in, right-out access provided there. Fire Department staff report of February 8th stated, this project meets all access, road widths, and turnabouts as presented. Any changes to the concept provided and approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission would require additional fire department review and approval. Also, the interesting thing from a technical perspective is the requirement for a fire apparatus access. And the code states that the access road shall be placed a distance apart equal to not less than 1/2 of the length of the overall diagonal dimension of the property or area to be served. I'm not smart enough to figure all of that out, so we talked with Mr. Bongiorno as well as Mr. Walsh just to be certain that we understood exactly how that works. And Mr. Bongiorno is here and he can correct me if we've interpreted that incorrectly. But it appears that from a functional perspective, access really cannot be provided, well, certainly not from Fairview Avenue. There's not going to be any access provided there. And any access to Eldon Gray, in addition to those from that service drive on the east side, would coincide really with the access into the park and just coming out of the gore of the roundabout. So in reality, the access from records is important. I believe it meets the fire department requirements, and it does in fact provide the access to comply with the fire department's access standards. And on that basis, we respectfully request that the council approve that access and waive the requirements of UDC 11-3A3A.1 as noted. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pro.
nice to see you, Mr. Wardle. The right turn lane headed north, how long will that be? How many vehicles will it accommodate?
I don't know exactly. Obviously, it's not intended for traffic to stack up there, but it pulls out, and maybe my technical assistant would have the ability to determine, but good question. Jonathan, do you know?
Mr. Mayor, for the record, my name is John Wardle, 2929 West Navigator Drive, Meridian, Idaho 83642. Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Perot, the access there, we worked with ACHD to come up with the design so it would operate properly. The total stacking is, I think, the clear area is 80 feet. I think the whole corridor is about 120 feet. So the important part of that was it allowed cars that were going to go into the project to get out of that straight northbound lane. So we worked with them on that and came up with a design that would work.
Mr. Mayor, a follow-up.
Councilman Pro.
Does that match, I know it's ACHD requirements, but does that match the anticipated amount of vehicles coming in at any given time into the project? From your analysis?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Perot, I will say that we did talk with ACHD about this issue a lot and wanted to ensure that we had the right design to get the cars in and out. So I can't tell you specifically the peak hour traffic that would come, but yes, they felt that this would work and create or would eliminate the backup that would go out to Fairview.
Thank you.
Jonathan, go back one slide. I would just note, though, that again, the circulation they can get from that front access from records to the back, but if you were coming home or leaving the project, it would be from the east side because that's the only place that the units can be. Well, the garages underneath the structures actually have access from the back. Only from the back. So they really cannot get into their parking spaces unless they are at the east side. I apologize if that wasn't clear. Does the next slide show that, Jonathan? Yes. You can see the little arrows at the back in the structures themselves. That is the access to and from the podium parking. And I apologize, Mr. Mayor. It just dawned on me that this must be my first time in front of the council forever because I did not identify myself. Mike Wardle, Brighton Corporation, 2929 West Navigator, Meridian 83642.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burt.
if you didn't have a voice like Walter Cronkite, you probably, we probably would have needed it, but I think we're good.
Thank you.
Council, any additional questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Clerk, do we have anyone sign up to provide testimony on this item?
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Okay. If there's anybody present who'd like to provide testimony on this item, that would be your opportunity to come forward. Or if you're online and would like to provide testimony, you can use the raise your hand feature. Seeing no one, would the applicant like to waive any final comments? Okay,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Holden.
just wouldn't mind hearing from Chief Margingiorno. I think looked like it was a very technical slide, and I think I understood it about as well as Mr. Wardle. And looks like that access point isn't necessary.
No, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Hoagland, the access is required. You for the amount of units that they have that they're building, they have to have two separate access points, and they have to be that half the diagonal apart. So the one on Records and the other one on Eldon Gray are far enough a point that far enough apart that they meet the code. So it's definitely a need.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
just a reminder that I should have paid closer attention in high school geometry class, but I understand. Thank you, Chief.
Council, any further dialogue or motions to close the public hearing?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
I move that we close the public hearing.
Second the motion.
Have a motion, a second to close the public hearing. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move that we waive the requirement to remove the access driveway via North Records Way as referenced in the findings and fact and conclusions of law, number A4K1X, I believe. I'll have to take a look at that in file number CR 2022-0004.
Second the motion.
I have a motion, a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, clerk, call the roll.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Strader.
Aye.
Burnt. Aye. Perot.
Aye.
Governor.
Aye.
Hoagland.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to. Thank you very much and have a good evening. Last time on the agenda is ordinance number 22-1979. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an ordinance related to H 2021-0081 Vanguard Village subdivision for rezone of a parcel of the land situated in a portion of the southeast quarter of the northwest one quarter, northeast one quarter of the southwest one quarter, and the northwest one quarter of the southeast one quarter of section 15, township 3 north, range 1 west, Boise Meridian, Ada, city of Meridian, Ada County, Idaho. Establishing and determining the land use zoning classification of 7.06 acres of land from CC Community Business Zoning District to the HE High Density Employment Zoning District, 17.38 acres from the CC Community Business and the HE High Density Employment Zoning District to the ME Mixed Employment Zoning District, 40.33 acres from the R40 High Density Residential, CC Community Business and ME Mixed Employment Zoning Districts to the R15 Medium High Density Residential Zoning District, and 1.10 acres from the HE High Density Employment to the CC Community Business Zoning District in the Meridian City Code. Provided that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing for a summary of the ordinance and providing for a waiver of the reading rules and providing an effective date.
Thank you. You have heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody present who would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Perot.
I move that we approve ordinance number 22-1979, an ordinance regarding file H 2021-0081 Vanguard Village subdivision.
Second.
With the suspension of rules.
Second agrees.
We have a motion and a second to approve the item under suspension of the rules. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Strader.
Aye.
Burnt. Perot.
Aye.
Governor.
Aye.
Hoagland.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to. Council, anything under future meeting topics?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
I would not like to let today go by without acknowledging the tragedy that happened in Texas today. And our hearts go out to the parents that are living everyone's worst nightmare. I would like to encourage our legislature to consider finding ways to still uphold the Second Amendment while supporting common sense gun reform. And I would like, our city is very limited in what we can do on that front, but I would love for us to increase the presence of the Meridian Police Department at our elementary schools while we try to find ways to resource that further going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.